Good morning. I'm very pleased to welcome everyone to this meeting of the Cabinet Member for Housing and Asset Management Decision Day, which is taking place in the Walton Suite, Winchester Guildhall. The time is 9:30 a.m. I'm Councillor Kelsey Lerney, Chairperson and Cabinet Member for Housing and Asset Management. Please can I advise that the open parts of the meeting are being audio recorded and live streamed from the Council's website. In addition, a video recording of the meeting will be uploaded to the Council's YouTube channel after the meeting. Please can I remind any officers joining virtually to turn off their cameras and mute their microphones until invited to speak. Please can I also remind those in the meeting to speak clearly and remember to use their microphone. Finally, please can I ask everyone to ensure that mobile phones and other electronic devices are on silent or switched off entirely. So thank you very much. So looking at the agenda, we start with disclosure of interests. Have we got any interests to declare? No, there are none. So business items, we have public participation. I have no members of the public wishing to speak. I have Monica Gill, who's here to speak on behalf of TACT. I assume you'd like to speak after the introduction to the paper? Yeah. Right, yes, thank you. And visiting councillors representation, I have Councillor Horrell. Councillor Horrell, would you like to speak on the paper?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. I also note that you've asked to speak on the exempt appendices.
Yes, please.
Right. Okay. Thank you. So we will deal with that when we reach exempt business. Right. So we have one business item on the agenda, which is the New Homes Scheme outline business case for Woodman Close, Sparsholt, DD30. And we have Debbie Rhodes here to speak to this. Debbie, would you like to introduce the paper?
Thank you. So the paper we have in front of us is the outline business case to construct 5 dwellings at Woodman Close in Sparsholt. This is 3 one-bedroom houses and 2 two-bedroom bungalows, and we wish to seek approval to take the scheme to planning application and then take it out to tender for a design and build contract. The project will be designed to AECB standards, so that's high energy efficient standards. The budget of just over $1 million, nearly 1.2 million was approved by Council in February 2021, and we're seeking approval at this stage just for a further cost of $50,000 to allow further investigations prior to the planning application. I don't think there's anything more to say on that.
Right, thank you. Monica, would you like to speak at this point?
Just to confirm that TACT were behind this scheme right from the outset. The only reservations we had was the loss of garden for the 14 and 13, one of which I think, according to this, has been sorted, and parking. And reading through the notes, I think parking is still an issue, isn't it?
Yes, I think we will come on to that later.
Okay, but otherwise we're behind the scheme anyhow.
Right, thank you very much. I think we will come to parking later. Can you just cover that point about the loss of gardens?
So number 13 and 14 Woodman Close will have smaller gardens. We've worked closely with number 13, who are our team and housing management team, so she's aware about the loss of garden, and that will be included. There'll be a discretionary home loss payment for that. Number 14 was let on the basis that they would have a smaller garden when it was last let. But the bungalows have been designed to really sort of sit so that they're not overlooking those two properties.
I think that's what did actually, you know, we were wondering if they were going to be so close, but if they're not, then I think, you know, TAC members will be happy with that, as long as they are, you know, they get some, I don't know whether it'll be reduction in rent or whether it'll be monetary payment. That is one of the questions we've been asked.
Yes, so there will be a discretionary payment for the number 13 who's losing the garden. And also, because there's a change of levels, the bungalows sit lower down, so they don't overlook number 13 and number 14.
Okay, thank you very much.
Right. Thank you. So I'd now like to invite Councillor Horrell to speak.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for allowing me to speak this morning. As the Councillor for Wanston and Micheldever, I actually live in Sparsholt, so this is very much home territory. And I think the first thing to say, I welcome the use. In fact, it was my predecessor who suggested that the land might be used many years ago to add some more housing. So an excellent idea to use our own land to provide some additional housing. Importantly, some of our larger properties in the area, and obviously bungalows provide an easier property to manage, but also means that those individuals can stay in the community that they love. So all of those things, Chair, I think are really positive, and which is why in consultation the development of the houses has been really well received. The key contention came from parking, and myself and the head of housing did a meeting on site in May, and actually I think came to an agreement with the locals about a compromise position on parking, which allowed additional spaces to be made available, but also preserved the open space that everyone wanted. And I know, subject to the officer's position being filled, then I think broadly we have agreement on the approach. But that obviously has to be still resolved formally. But I know information's gone to the residents about how we intend to go ahead. And I think, Chair, we should be reassured that that is an important step, because where the properties are intended to be built is used as a bit of a car park on the pavement at the moment, and so that would not be possible when we have the new homes. Chair, there is a query I have which is why I've asked to speak on the exempt part related to what's in the paper and to the financial appraisal, which is why I've asked to speak on that. So I apologise for asking for the exempt part, but I don't see any other way of doing that without going into exempt. So, Chair, I know the village is very supportive of the homes integrated into the community, very supportive that they'll be let to people with links to the village, and we welcome the opportunity to move forward and add these to our housing stock. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Horrell. We have with us Gillian Knight, the Corporate Head of Housing, so I'd like to invite Gilly to come forward and speak as to where we are with the parking situation.
Thank you. I think Councillor Horrell summed it up perfectly. That really is where we are at the moment. We had a petition from the local community, and as Councillor Horrell said, we met and we had a really good, robust conversation. So I think they felt we were being quite transparent about the process, and they were heard because they were very concerned about the larger scheme that we were proposing. So I think the community feel heard. The petition has been replied to on behalf of Councillor Thompson. And we're now at the stage where we will be looking at the general estate improvements programme as a whole later in the autumn, but it certainly remains on the programme. The budget's still in place, and we just really need to make a compromise with the community around what scheme is it we really want to see there. I guess one of the hurdles which we talked about with Councillor Horrell is Hampshire County Council's part in it, in that we needed to get their permission to work on the highway. It's very, very small, the road, as it goes round the green. It's terribly tiny. And so when people do park on the road, then buses and stuff couldn't get through. So we have got to work with the county around getting their agreement for the scheme to go ahead. And Chris Evans will be working on new designs, etc. But that is the only hurdle I'm slightly concerned about.
Right, so my understanding is that the parking that's being lost isn't parking spaces as such, it's just an informal parking situation.
Yes, I saw that for myself. So it was a van with a trailer and a car on the top, and another van parked up on the pavement, pretty much taking up all of the pavement. So I think the parish council were going to work with people that weren't parking correctly as well. So they've monitored it and been very proactive about trying to monitor the demand there and the issues that are associated with that. But yes, that shouldn't affect the current new build.
And in our conversations with planning, they haven't raised any concerns about the amount of parking, so we can de-link the estate improvements parking scheme from the parking at this site. Yeah, it's our discretionary scheme that we're looking at improving the area with. Yeah. Right. Okay, thank you very much. So I think we've covered the points that have been made both in public speaking and in councillors speaking. However, Councillor Horrell does wish to speak on the exempt paper, so we will need to move into exempt. I'm not quite sure what the process is for that on the decision day, Nancy.
We just formally agree that we're going to move into exempt, but there's a few sort of procedural things we need to do in the background to make sure that we're not broadcasting the exempt as well. So.
Right, so if I move the meeting into the exempt item, yeah.
Let's pause. Thank you, Jane.
Thank you.
Right, thank you. So we're now reopening the meeting after having had some discussion around rent levels in connection to the exempt appendix to the report. With regard to what I've heard today and the contents of the paper, I'm very pleased to be able to recommend that we do move forward in constructing these dwellings in Sparsholt. I welcome the AECB building standard that we're proposing to use in terms of the efficiency of these buildings. Experience elsewhere suggests that this will lead to not only low running costs but also very comfortable buildings to live in, which is very important for us and our tenants. In particular, in the current environment, homes with good ventilation, which is what we're proposing here, are very important. And I know it's something that's being looked at elsewhere. Concerns have been raised around parking in connection to the loss of some informal parking on site. I'm satisfied that the parking loss is fairly marginal, but also that I'm happy to commit to revisiting a parking scheme for the area which will deal with some of the wider parking problems which aren't actually connected to the developments that we're proposing today. So moving to the recommendations, recommendation 1 is that is to authorise the corporate head of asset management to prepare and submit a planning application to the statutory planning authority to obtain planning permission for the construction of 5 properties at Woodman Close, Sparsholt, at an estimated cost of up to £50,000 to allow for any further investigative work and fees. Recommendation 2, authorise the corporate head of asset management to invite tenders to undertake the design and build of 5 properties at Woodman Close using a standard JCT design and build contract. 3, authorise the corporate head of asset management to negotiate and agree terms for easements, way leaves and related agreements with utility providers, telecom media suppliers, highways authority and neighbours in order to facilitate the development subject to final decision to proceed with the scheme. Recommendation 4, I'm proposing an amendment to make clear that we will be revisiting the rent levels on these properties as part of the final business case. Do you have some wording for that?
Chair, you could, after the words to agree whether to proceed with the scheme, you could add comma, the final rent levels to be applied, and then revert back to, and to award and enter into a construction design contract.
Right, thank you very much. So can you read out the whole recommendation 4, please, Richard?
So to note that the final business case report is to be brought to members after tenders are evaluated and the final tender price is known, to agree whether to proceed with the scheme, the final rent level to be applied, and to award and enter into a construction design and build contract with the preferred bidder.
Yeah, so with that amendment, I'm happy to agree all the recommendations before us today. So I think that was the only business item for this meeting. So if I ask Democratic Services to make that amendment, and I will sign that decision when it's ready.
Yes, of course, Chair.
Thank you. And with that, we'll bring the meeting to a close. So thank you everybody for attending today, and I look forward to seeing you at a future date.
Thank you. Thank you.